everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad Gustafson and I share two books that we love and we think you should read when, Brad?
Right now. And I'm jealous of your intro. That looked like really cool how you did that. I don't know.
I
Well
held
done.
up two hands.
I don't know, but it was like the angles and the God. All right.
Lots of I practiced for hours before.
Well, I don't know. It just seemed very like authoritative. So that you caught me off guard. Like, read them right now, people. Listen to Jen. She's not messing around.
You're usually in charge of the hand signals on
I
our
know.
show. So.
I think I was jealous. That's why I was like a deer in the headlights. Like, wow, that looked really good. I'll be practicing after the show. Okay.
I love it. Well, so tell me what you've been reading this week.
Okay, so this is really cool. Book mail is one of my favorite things on the planet, and I recently I have the chance to be on the Scholastic Principal Advisory Board. That's a mouthful, and I get to just connect with literacy leaders across the country, and we got some book mail, the Principal Advisory Board recently from Scholastic, and as I was reading and picking and choosing what I was most excited to read, this one floated to the top. There were others too. But it's interesting. Here's a little teaser for you. I'm going to share hopefully a really compelling book talk for this read aloud. It is incredible. And then I'm going to share one thing from the book that I disagreed with, which it feels like a weird, almost a taboo thing. I don't know if I've ever book talked and something like this, and then also said, but I'm not sure about this. So
I'm real excited now. I'm
yeah. I don't know if I've ever done this. Is really risky for me. So anyway, the book that I fell in love with is I Believe I Can, and it should probably look familiar to a lot of people. It's by the New York Times best-selling creators of I Am Enough. I think a lot of people have probably heard of that book, by Grace Byers, and then pictures by Keturah, Bobo. So I'm going to share, because there are a couple different parts of this that I fell in love with, and it's a really interesting how the words are incredible. And I'm going to read those first because I was picturing myself like how I would, if I had a class of kiddos my own. I'm a principal, as a lot of you know, like what I would do with this book. It feels like one of the most important and versatile books I've read in a really long time. But I think how I would start would be just reading to kiddos without letting them see any pictures, which is counterintuitive in a picture book, right? So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do want to give you a flavor for how beautiful the language is. So just a couple pages. I can sail like mighty ships, like the oceans, I run deep. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. After the show, Jen, you can give me read aloud tips. I'm always enthralled by how you do it. I
think just being authentic is all you need to do.
Well, there you go. You get a lot of that. I am like a lion's roar. I am like a dragon's flames. I'm jumping towards the end now. There is light within my smile. There is voice within my sound. My presence matters in this world. My life is worthy. There's a plan. I know I can do anything. And obviously there's a better flow and cadence if you read it cover to cover. I just skipped around to a couple little snippets I wanted to share, but now I'm going to go back and I want to share the same pages with the art. Okay.
Sure.
I can sail like mighty ships, like oceans. I run deep. And the things that I was noticing in this that just jumped out at me were how representative. I can picture our kiddos at our school, and I see so many of them in these pages.
Yeah.
I also picture the curiosity. Like I was picturing giving this book to a class or a whole school or a family and saying, find inspiration in this book for something that you want to do, that you want to create, that you want to write, a difference that you want to make in the world, because there's so many little important, powerful things that would answer the age-old parent or teacher nightmare of I'm bored. Like this book would answer that. Let me jump ahead to the other pages that I read. I love this one. I am like a lion's roar. I am like a dragon's flame. And it reminded me when I was in a play in third grade, like as a kiddo, I thought I was like the real deal in this play. I was actually like a bird, but I made attachments for my hands that were like wings. So I resonated with
I
that
love it.
a lot. It just brought me back to 3rd grade. And then I'm going to the other 2 pages that I shared already. There is light within my smile. There is voice within my sound.
How gorgeous.
I would think there's so much to notice and appreciate. My
Mm-hmm.
presence matters in this world. My life is worthy. There's a plan. I know I can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so there's a simple elegance and just a profound beauty, not only in the words and in the pictures and what it stands for. So that's why I am saying, like, read this now. It's incredibly versatile on so many different levels. And now here's the thing that I disagree with. It's from the back cover copy, just the top. I won't read the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it says, like a rocket, I will ignite. I believe I can, as a tribute to the limitless potential of boys and girls of every background. All they need is to believe in themselves. And I'm thinking to myself, belief in yourself is important, but what
Mm-hmm.
also matters, and this is the educator and dad in me, is like creating the conditions where that belief can flourish, because we can
Yeah.
have kids believe in themselves who come into these doors, but if the environment, if the messaging, if the pictures and the access to the curriculum, if they don't see themselves, or if they don't feel it and believe it and know it from us in a relational sense and a learning sense, then their belief, that's a lot to ask of a kindergartner, to have that hold
Mm-hmm.
true and overcome barriers that might be unintentionally put in front of them. So for that, I'm just saying, I agree that kids need to believe in themselves, but I also think we need to believe in them and be really intentional in how we let them know that we believe in them. So that's my teeny bit of
Sure.
disagreement on the back cover copy. But not to take away from the book, like the book is a must read and beautiful. It's I believe I can.
Leads me to questions, right? Because obviously I agree with everything you said there. But one thing I've been thinking about recently
Oh, 1
is
second. Sorry, I'm with you.
that's all right. The real world here, but is as adults who love picture books and who love books written for much younger humans, much younger readers. I mean, I very rarely read a book that was written for my target age group,
Same here.
and so as that, I try to remember, as I have questions about things like that, I try to think about who the book is written for. So, like, the target audience for that book, yes, I think it's primarily kids, but there's also adults, but our educators, it leads me to questions when you, as an author or as an editor and a publisher, as you write copy for the back of the book, who are you assuming is going to read it? And if you think it might be kiddos, then maybe it's empowering to put the power in their hands, and say, like, your success isn't dependent on someone else. All you need is to believe in you. I don't know that for sure. I have no idea if that's what was going through their mind. But those are the kind of questions I have about those things, because when there's a sticking point for me in a book where I think, I'm not sure about that, then one of the questions I try to ask is, who are they thinking will be reading that? And so what would be the purpose?
So well said and thought out and profound. And you're right. I think a lot of us have the affliction of, you read it as an educator and like how you might empower and who you want to give it to and all that stuff. But you're right. The pictures ooze, like they invite kiddos into just this world of curiosity and being affirmed and things like that. So that is spot on. The one little almost juxtaposition is, for me, the words and the cadence is so profound and beautiful. I couldn't quite picture like a kindergartner or first grader appreciating them. Like I could picture many different kids. I'm not saying not to read it, but it's just so beautiful and above the average of a lot of what I read. I almost pictured like high school kids like doing a study on the words, but yet the pictures don't necessarily say that. So
or
anyway,
as a read aloud, like if it was written with the intention that it would be shared between an adult and a a child, then, I don't know. There's just, I've never written a picture book. Seeing the book as you showed it today is the first time I've ever seen it. So I have no, like deep knowledge of this. It's just, those are the kinds of questions I think about when there's a point that I stick on, then I just try to think, what's the intention here?
That's really wise. And the last thing I'll say, just so I'm not confusing, or just so my point is clear, like, this is a beautiful book. I would recommend for all ages. So I love that we were analyzed and had the conversation and had lots of questions, but this, like, zero hesitation. It is, it's incredible.
Sure. Well, it's funny you say that, because will you hold up the cover and mention the title again one more time just for people? Great.
I believe I can.
I love it. I love it. It's funny, again, we're having this parallel journey, because the book that I want to share today, I absolutely have zero hesitance in sharing. I fell in love with it, but there is one sticking point for me in it as well, and that I wasn't sure I was going to bring up on the show, but now since you did, it's like, oh, this is a perfect connection, right? But what's interesting to me about this book, and again, it's very similar to what you said, is that I found it to be the kind of book that elementary school readers could enjoy on one level, and then middle and even high school kids could enjoy in a different way. The book is called Black Heroes of the Wild West, and it's written by James Otis Smith. And the introduction was, I want to mention, is by Keturah Nelson, who a lot of people know as being like the illustrator of The Undefeated and a zillion other gorgeous picture books, just such an accomplished artist. He did not illustrate this book, but he wrote a really powerful introduction to it, which I suggest people don't skip over. This is actually kind of like a hybrid graphic novel, in so much as it tells the story of these three individuals who were born into slavery, but then who really became heroes of a period of time that is really mythologized in American history, that we think of, cowboys and, taming the Wild West and things like this. But these real individuals born into slavery became heroes of this time, but whose stories were kind of lost in a narrative that's been retold to privilege some voices over others, right? And the stories of the three heroes, like of Stagecoach Mary and Bass Reeves, etc., that's the graphic novel part. And they're really fun and adventurous, and elementary school readers, whether they can absorb the text or it's being read to them, or whether or not they are fourth or fifth graders reading that independently, I think they would just love those stories, because they're fun, there's adventure, there's humor, the characters are sort of larger in life. But what I love also about this book is that interspersed with the graphic novel are like primary sources. There's photographs, there's timelines, like there's the real Stagecoach Mary, right? And in the back, there's a whole timeline with other supplementary information about the time period. And there's a narrative in that content and in the introduction from Keturah Nelson that talks about how the history of any country, but specifically America, since that's the one these people were from and the authors are from and live in, the history of America is told from a perspective that oftentimes leaves out a lot of voices. And so how often do we hear about Black people performing heroic deeds, being self-sufficient, living lives that are in many ways really empowered during this time period, or in a lot of time periods in American history. So these untold narratives paint a different picture of what the history of Black people is in this country in a way that I think is really empowering. Doesn't in any way silence the suffering that Black people have endured in this country, but adds another layer to it that is an empowering one, I think. And so while younger kids would love just the stories of these heroes, I think older kids can be thinking about history and how it's told and all of that stuff too. So this is a book that really spans, like grade levels, from the youngest readers all the way to high school readers, depending on how in depth you want to think about the narrative. But the sticking point for me, the point where I was like, had questions,
I've been on the edge of my seat here, Jen.
I know, is the term Wild West in the cover because, and in the title, because I've read about how that term, especially for Indigenous people, can feel harmful. The narrative, the mythology of the Wild West, in which there's these self reliant cowboys that tame a wild country, leaves out the fact that this was a country that was already inhabited by people who were peaceful and who were really eliminated in some parts of the country and forced into reservations, and to the dominoes that fell as a result of that are still being felt amongst Indigenous communities even today. And so I know for some Indigenous communities, the term Wild West feels, like a term of colonization, that feels like a term of sort of white supremacy, et cetera. And even though, so I've been asking myself as I've been reading this book, and again, just like you, have no hesitancy in sharing it because I thought the book itself was wonderful. I just had questions about why that term. And I wonder if it wouldn't have been helpful to have a section of the book that maybe spoke to the title and why choosing that. However, for this book, I would say that I think educators are part of the audience for this book, just by virtue of how it's set up, like how it's organized and stuff. I think that the creators, it feels like educators were thought of. And so I think that's a great conversation that educators can have with their students, especially older ones. Even if it's not specifically in the text, that's a conversation that could be had about why do you think this phrase was used, and wonder what a different phrase would have been, those kinds of things. So
I'm so glad you shared that. That was a great insight.
So it's called Black Heroes of the Wild West. And I love, again, the format, the sort of hybrid of primary source documents and graphic novels. I thought the stories of the three heroes were just really well done. I loved Kadir Nelson's introduction, and I think you should read it now. But I also, if I was in a classroom or library with kiddos, I think I might have some deeper conversations about it.
That sounds like a book that I would have loved, that I would love to read right now, but as a kid too.
Yeah.
Recently, as in within the last few days, I saw the Texas Elementary Principal School Association posted on social media a couple of fun facts kind of to help champion Black History Month. But one of them, and I hope I'm not misquoting it, but it was that 25% of cowboys were Black. And I guess I hadn't thought about that, maybe partly because of how they're portrayed in movies, just that representation hasn't been there. So I thought, wow, like, thanks for teaching us that. So that book feels like a step in the right direction to help lend more voices and accuracy to how things looked and felt and worked.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm just also, I think as kids get older, this is an opportunity to think about, the reason we teach history, in my view, is because we want to learn from it. And also we can sort of trace fault lines from what happened, hundreds of years ago, and how they still are affecting us today, right? History doesn't just exist in this one period of time, in a timeline, and it's just right there, in that vacuum. History affects, there's dominoes that continue to affect us. Even now, things that happened hundreds of years ago. So thinking about books like this and why those stories are left out, and how we can see the effects of that silencing of lots of different stories of lots of different people still affecting our world today, is an important conversation for kiddos, especially as they get older, to think about. It's a way to take a text that maybe on the surface looks like it's for younger kids. There's illustrations and all this other stuff. On the surface, a high school teacher might dismiss this as not being rigorous enough, but I'm of the belief that the rigor comes from what we do with the text, and not from the words necessarily on the page.
All right, Jen. I was trying to remain engaged. I felt like I should be taking notes there for a little bit. That was very inspiring, and you're always
Professor
so.
LaGarde is
Sometimes I
on the
wonder,
case.
like, how did I get to show up here and be learning and talking with Jenn LaGarde? If I'm being honest, so thank you.
Well, I feel the same way. And if you weren't here, who would I ask every week to tell us where our 3.5 viewers can find our archive?
Well, you'd be able to call me, and I would let them know or let you know that they should probably go to bit.ly/read_this_now, and they would just be blown away at the resource and how accessible it is. Not only listing titles, but if they really wanted to go in and see book talk videos from the past conversations, they could do that too. So that would be what I would say if you called.
One of these days we're going to perfect which side of the screen we have to like, but I feel like this is a Wonder Twin moment,
Let's try it.
If we can, I think you do this way. So
and do I go like this?
I think
no,
so.
You know what? I think I go like this and you do it like that, and I bet it's going to work. You ready?
All right, let's try it. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Okay.
Yes,
so
I have a feeling that one works.
I can't wait. If it does, I'll put some like fireworks there.
I was studying like past shows where we've tried that and where it didn't work, and I honestly think we just cracked the riddle or the mystery.
I can't wait, and I know that like I said, our 3.5 viewers will be excited too. This is a momentous day in the history of Read This Now.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Jen.
Friend. Yes, happy reading, everyone.
Later.